Commissioner of the Unemployment Insurance Fund, Tebogo Moropeng, being placed on a precautionary suspension. That's after an investigation by the Auditor General into the way the fund's been paying out money. The Auditor General, Kimi Makwetu, saying today that when it came to PPE procurement, there were clear signs there had been overpricing and unfair processes. Khaya Sithole is an independent analyst, manages to marry finance and politics. I don't know how he does it. Khaya, good afternoon to you. This is a huge development. Tebogo Moropeng been at the forefront of trying to make payments during this time through the TERS system. Now he's been suspended.
Yeah, it is a massive development, and I think what makes this one particularly unique is the remarkably fast turnaround time between the actions being perpetrated at UIF in particular and the action being taken against those responsible. Keep in mind, Stephen, that this is based in response to the Auditor General's report, and the Auditor General's report covers the period up to 31 July 2020. So for the Auditor General to have completed the audit by 31 July 2020 and then produce the findings that are drastic or important enough for the Minister to then take action shows the capacity of the state to actually do these things when the right resources are committed and the right sense of urgency is put to the task.
Well, it's about political will, but if I was a lawyer defending Tebogo Moropeng, and I'm not, but if I were, I would say he, the entire system, the entire team at the UIF were put under the most unimaginable pressure. People were pushing for the money, 12 million applications. Of course mistakes were going to be made.
No, I don't think that is a valid argument, because what we have to then ask is, when a person says, I am the accounting officer of a particular institution, this is a person who is saying to the rest of us that I know what it takes to run this institution, I know what systems and processes I need to put in place in order to execute on a particular action. Now, he signed up for this in his capacity as accounting officer, and his team, his entire leadership team, signed up for this task. And the key issue here is not whether there was money paid with a sense of haste, but rather whether the money was paid appropriately to the right beneficiaries. And if the answer is that it was not paid to the right beneficiaries, you cannot blame that on system issues rather than questions of competence and really how the system works in an ordinary setup. So I think we do have to hold them to account. They are responsible for the system, and this system was not born yesterday. It's a system that should have been there forever. Are we now saying that actually if we look deeper into some of the payments they've made, we'll find multiple incidences of this? That's the possibility.
You raise a good point. All right, the probe by the Auditor General into PPEs and protective equipment, it finds overpricing. And I mean, in a way, we've already seen some of that from affidavits filed by the Special Investigating Unit. It's not a surprise. He's confirming what we know. But the real question then is, do we actually expect people to go to jail? We now have so many investigations, so much raw data, in fact. The question is, will prosecutions come through?
Well, the difficulty here is that, I think we've spoken about this before, is that for as long as state procurement is so fragmented across different departments and different institutions, it is very real that somebody will buy a piece of bread for R1 in one department and then sell it to another department for R5. And for as long as the people that are at the point of processing that transaction do not exercise the presence of mind to ask themselves whether R5 for a loaf of bread could ever be justified, then this becomes the way things are done. And I think what has happened here is that the unique situation here is that there were reference points. National Treasury published guidelines to indicate to people that this is probably the type of price that you should be paying. And in spite of that, people still went around that. Now, there's a multiple set of reasons why that happens, because at the end of the day, if you have 3 service providers that have submitted valid bids, you choose from those 3. And if those 3 have found a way to talk to themselves behind your back and come up with the price that gives the impression that it's the lowest price, while it's still not the most effective price, then you're stuck with bargaining with just those 3. So these are the limitations in state procurement that have always existed. And of course, the people that know state procurement, or the people that engage with the state with nefarious means, knew about this, and they were always going to take advantage of it. The question that we should be asking is whether any transaction should have been processed with the National Treasury guideline being breached in terms of pricing.
I mean, it would seem to me that if you actually did breach the National Treasury guideline, you're actually in serious trouble. You shouldn't do it.
Well, I suppose at that end it will be down to the functionaries that did the processing of the payments. But again, for them, their defense is now going to be, well, by the time this came to us, we were told that a proper bidding process had been undertaken and this was the winning bidder. It was no longer up to us to then query the merits of their pricing and to then interrogate it against some other reference point, because as you said earlier on, it was during an emergency process. So I think in that one, everybody's going to have a plausible deniability of saying, actually, by the time it got to me, I assumed the work had been done by some other people, so therefore for that one you're going to struggle to find someone who's fully accountable. And perhaps what we should be asking for is whether those National Treasury guidelines, when they were published, were explicitly binding on the accounting officers to say, should any single item be acquired for an amount in excess of this, and you're the accounting authority for this, you are fully responsible for that excess. If it was that explicit, then perhaps it would be much easier to then say, actually, DG, this falls into your shoulders.
You made a very important point earlier about how quickly the state can act when it wants to, and part of this is because of the capacity of the Auditor General. Now, we know in the past people who work for the Auditor General's office have actually themselves been intimidated. Doesn't seem to have happened here. Shows you the powers of the Auditor General. Do we need to think very carefully about how we protect this institution going into the future, how we make sure it has enough resources, particularly when we're going to get a new Auditor General soon?
Yeah, it's remarkably important because now, remember, the new Auditor General who takes office on the 1st of December is going to inherit significantly stronger powers of doing these types of things. It's going to inherit the type of powers associated with them saying, well, actually, we are no longer going to say that there was irregular expenditure in a department as if the department is some living organism, but rather we're going to say specifically it was Stephen who works in that particular department, in that particular corner, who actually did this, so that by the time we then start asking the question of how to recover the funds that have been lost, we are able to say it is Stephen that is going to get a certificate of debt in the absence of any other recourse that we can find. So I do think that protecting the Office of the Auditor General is actually a national imperative. And as know, before, people have been threatened when they're trying to do the audits, and auditors have had to leave audit clients on the basis that the people that were obviously implicated in what the Auditor General was trying to unpack were then feeling that actually we cannot let them get too close, so therefore they'd be threatened and then they'd have the hotel rooms broken into. We still don't have a solution for that because, of course, you need a proper law enforcement agency. We cannot expect every single person who works for the Auditor General to now carry a gun when they're trying to conduct an audit. So we need to have an overhaul of all these interlinked systems. Law enforcement should be working. And let's face it, if law enforcement was working very well, perhaps the Auditor General wouldn't have so much to uncover in the first place.